David is on the run. What we're going to see now in chapters 21, 22, 23, we're going to see David's progression through that part of Israel, and we'll track it on a map. Of course, there has to be a map. We track it on a map and find out where he went, what happened in each location. We won't do a lot of reading there. I'll try to delineate to you what goes on in each situation. So we have those details coming up. Jonathan, his dearest friend, can no longer associate with him. In fact, David's very presence puts others in danger. When Saul finds out David's been associating with them and they've been friendly to David, then their life is in danger also. We see a fantastic tragedy associated with what I just said, and that'll be coming up shortly. In fact, David's very presence puts others in danger, as we'll see in chapter 22, but God will be with him during this time. Now, the question should come to mind that why is all this trouble necessary? David is anointed of God. He is a selected servant of God. You would think that he is just surrounded with God's blessing and protection. But now, every time he turns left or right, there is somebody that is after him. There is an army that's on the other side of the hill. There's just all kinds of difficulty happening. But why? That's the question. Why? My answer to that is this, that David is learning to walk with the Lord. There are things that even though he was close to God as a shepherd and playing his harp on the hills of Bethlehem, there are things he still has to learn if God is going to move him from that into being the king of Israel. So he is still learning. Let's pursue that just a little bit. You may identify with some of the words appearing on the screen now. If you've ever had bad treatment, if there's ever been misunderstandings and you were the brunt of it, if there were ever accusations that you didn't deserve, or trouble that came your way, or just stress-filled days, weeks, or months, and you did not know how to wiggle free of that stress, that pressure that was there, just causing your heart to beat faster than it should. You ask yourself the question, how in the world does one handle this? Well, that's the story of David. It may be your story. It may be your story in the past. It may be your story right now. It may be a story that's coming up yet. Why? Why? How does one handle this? Well, basically, I suppose, in my limited thinking for this study, that there are basically two choices that we are faced with, and one is excellent, the other one is less so. All right, the first choice is that we learn to trust God. These things come so we can learn to trust God. You say, isn't that simplistic? I don't think so. I think that's exactly what was happening to David, that these things were coming to him to perfect his trust in God, to perfect his faith, and through each trial and difficulty, he would learn to either trust God, or choice number two, or he would worry and stress over the outcomes. Some of you who've spent enough time, significant time, worrying and stressing over outcomes, you know that that's a dead-end street. That's non-productive. Doesn't do much at all. Let's expand it a little bit. The idea is that you cannot mature without trials. If we apply that just to our growing from a child to adulthood, you know that there are trials. You go to school for the first time, you have the trial of making friends, you have the trial of passing tests, you have the trial of doing homework, you have trials that will take you up through those young years, and then you get into the high school, the college, and then the dating and hoping it's all in that category, in that order, and then family life and so on. Each one of those junctures in life has a certain trial and a stress to it. You cannot mature, you cannot gain maturity in adulthood without coming through those trials and learning how to handle them. Also, you can't learn endurance without resistance. Now you think about it. You can't learn to endure unless there's something to resist. If you've ever been in the exercise or weightlifting category, you know that the weight represents a resistance. And if you want to build a muscle and you want to develop the shoulders and the arms and the legs and so on, you have to lift that resistance, and you have to learn endurance by lifting regularly, assumably daily, and so on, to achieve your goal. You can't learn endurance without it. Also, trials increase faith and confidence and stability. Why does David have to go through this? He doesn't have that yet. And so these things is what we're looking at when we look at David and when we look at our own lives. The value of trouble and difficulty is that we gain maturity, we gain stature and growth through the things that we endure, and we gain strength and stability, faith, confidence through the trials that come our way. It reminds me of something that James said in the first chapter. He said, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." And when you first read that, if you're a new Christian, you say, "What are you talking about, James? Why should I be happy when I meet obstacles like that?" James says, because you want results, that's why. "For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness." So we come back to the question, why did David have to go through those things? For the same reason you do. In David's case, he was preparing for royalty. We're just preparing to survive and to be the best we possibly can be, and to lead the way for other people coming behind us. You see, by David going through those things, later on he can say something very pivotal and very, very poignant when he says this in Psalm 40, verse 17. "I am poor and needy, but the Lord takes thought for me. You are my help and my deliverer." That's what he learned by going through these things. You are. Not were in this case, but you are. Not I hope you will be, but you are my help and my deliverer. Psalm 40. Psalm 63, I think it is. "For you have been my help." Now this is looking back, and he is looking in retrospect now. 63 verse 7 of Psalms. You have been my help. So what does that mean now, David? You have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. There is something very special about achievement when you're walking with God and you can look back and say, I won the battle with God's help. And David says exactly that. You have been my help. I look back at some of those trials I came through, and I see that you have been my help. So today I can sing. That's the value of people that come into a worship service on a Sunday morning and sit there and sing some of the hymns like we sang this morning. And they can sing it with a full throat of joy and exuberance because God has been their refuge and He has led them, and now they can sing with joy. David is learning to walk with the Lord. We learn to walk with the Lord, I think, in the same way. All right. Let's come back to our text in 1 Samuel 21. David now visits the tabernacle at Nob. The first leg of David's flight is to the tabernacle of the Lord at Nob. For 300 years since Joshua, Shiloh has been the location of the tabernacle. But when the ark was captured and Eli's sons were killed in battle, Shiloh was abandoned and apparently it was destroyed. So let's get a little image, shall we, on the old map, all right? And here we are. All right, Shiloh here, Jericho, Jerusalem, just to get you acquainted with a few things. Now you are still acquainted with, are you not, with the 4 water features of if you don't pass this and when I'm done. The Great Sea, also known as? That's right, the Mediterranean. All right. The Sea of Chinnereth, also known as?
Galilee.
Sea of Galilee. All right. The Salt Sea, also known as? Dead Sea. And that blue line that connects the two is also known as? The Jordan River. Excellent. You passed the test. Okay. You get a pass then on that. I'm showing you the whole map again, not because you weren't acquainted with it, but I wanted to show you what I'm focusing in on of the whole map, and it's this area right here. Let's expand that, and then let's do some talking. All right. Shiloh was the religious center of Israel at that particular time. It had been when they crossed the Jordan River initially under Joshua. It was Gilgal, and then it became Shiloh. Then under a war, Shiloh was attacked. The ark was stolen or confiscated by the Philistines, and they moved then the religious center to Ramah. I'm sorry, to Nob. Ramah is the city of Samuel. Gibeah becomes it's Saul's home, but it's also where the palace is at this time. You say, I thought it was at Jerusalem. No, that doesn't happen for quite a while yet. Under Solomon, he moves everything to Jerusalem, David and Solomon actually, and so on, but not yet. So this is not a point. Jebus is the name of the city that they conquered. Gibeah is the place where Saul's palace is. Ramah is the place where Samuel's home was and where the school of the prophets was. All right, now you're completely confused, but it's all right. David visits Samuel at Ramah. He talks to him there. That's where where Saul and all of his messengers come and fall under the power of the Spirit of God and prophesy and so on. While that is happening, David escapes and he goes to Nob, which is a priestly city. Some thinks it's one of the schools of the prophets. I don't know if that's accurate or not. There were several that we know of, and probably several more that we don't know of. But this is where David goes. Nob is known as the city of priests. That was a priestly city, perhaps a Levitical city would be a better explanation, where the Levites were. The Levites were the priestly tribe. He goes there, and he's on the run. Everything we're going to discuss in the next 3 chapters is David on the run. He's on the run. He has a few people that come with him, a few men that come with him, and they all leave, and they come to the city of Nob. He has no weapons because he left his home very quickly. He has no food because he left his home very quickly. And so he shows up alone. He tells his men, let me go in alone and talk to the priests and see if I can get some food and some help. So he goes there and he talks to the priests, and he is given some holy bread at this city. You say, what's holy bread? You'd have to go back to Exodus, and then you'll find it also in Leviticus, chapter 19 of Leviticus. You'll have to go back to find out what the significance was. But since we don't have time, let me tell you what it was, all right? The meaning of the holy bread, every Sabbath, they would put 2 stacks of holy bread on a table in the tabernacle, 6 in each stack. And probably when we talk about loaves, we're probably talking about flat bread in that way. So it was easy to stack. And why 6 in each stack, I don't know, but 2 stacks were required, and so on. It would stay on that special table. It was consecrated and considered holy. It was called bread of the presence, or the showbread. You've heard that term. And it was considered holy. After a week of being on the table, then the priests were permitted to eat it, assuming they were still consecrated and were not defiled in any way. So David comes into the priest. Ahimelech is a priest on duty, and he says, I don't have any food. Well, I do have the consecrated bread. But he has to do due diligence to make sure that they qualify, because they have to be consecrated themselves. They have to be undefiled themselves, both David and the men that were with him. So the one question that the priest asked David is, have any of you had sexual relationships today? And David said, no, we haven't. Because that would have defiled them, believe it or not. That would have defiled them until sunset. Then they would have been free of the defilement. I can't talk any more about that because I don't know any more about that. But that was the question that the priest asked, if they were cleansed and consecrated themselves. He ends up giving David, on that basis then, giving David the week-old consecrated bread. If you've left bread out for a week, you know it's probably not at the top of your grocery shopping list to buy stale bread. But David took it, and he took it for his men. I like this picture. I don't think it's a painting. I think it's a photo of a picture. I like it because you've got a picture of the priest. This represents David, and then the figure in the back peering through the. Remember him. His name is Doeg. Remember him because he plays a part in several chapters. All right. David says, all right, you've given me whatever food you've got. Do you have any weapons? And the priest says, no, I don't really have. Well, I've got one. He said, I've got the sword of Goliath that you took from the Philistine when you killed him. I've got that. It's in the holy place behind the ephod. I'll tell you about that in a moment also. Behind the ephod, I suppose they kept that as a memento of the victory that God provided when David killed Goliath. Doeg is here. The sword of Goliath is then given to David also. But there's a dark foreshadowing coming that involves Doeg, who is there witnessing David's presence there. David then moved to Gath, and he faked insanity before Achish of Gath. Well, let me show you. He goes from Nob to Gath. Now, it looks like it'd be a long distance, but when you consider that the distance between Ramah and Nob might be 2 miles, that'll kind of give you a scale to judge the rest of it by. So he leaves Nob, he goes, he checks with a priest, he's there for, I don't think very long, for a few minutes, and gets the bread, he gets the sword of Goliath, and then he and his men go to Gath. Do you remember who lived at Gath, who was from Gath, whose hometown it was? That's right, Goliath. He's going into Philistine territory. He's going to seek asylum from his archenemy, the Achish, the king of this city, the mayor, I guess, of this city, Gath. So he's got to pull off some ruse to be undetected. And he pretends to be insane. He lets saliva run down his beard, and he is a mess, and he probably threw some dirt on his clothing and so on. And then he goes to the gate of the town, and he makes weird markings on the gate and so on, and acts like a real insane person. Finally, some of the soldiers of the king there, the soldiers in the city of Gath, they say, wait a minute, isn't this David? Isn't this the one that they sing about back in their territory, about David slew his 10,000s and Saul his thousands? Isn't this David? And finally they arrive at the idea, this is David. But Achish has a classic response when they bring that news to him. And Achish still sees him under his assumed insanity, and he says, do I not have enough insane people around here that you have to bring me this fool also, you know? That's classic. Finally, David is permitted to stay there, and Achish gives him asylum, and he stays there for a while until it gets a little too warm for him. All right, let's go back. David moves to Gath and feigns insanity before Achish. Next, David gathers 400. I don't think he was gathering them. I think they gathered to him. He gathers 400 men at the cave of Adullam. Now we're in chapter 22. This whole region is just honeycombed with caves. You've got it all down through here, all the way to En-Gedi, Masada. No, Masada's not here. Escapes me right now what that city is. That's not pictured. All of this area is just honeycombed with caves, some big, some small. We'll explore some of them actually, and so on. Right now, he is at the cave of Adullam, and this is where he gathers, where the people come and are gathered to him. This is quite a motley crew that comes. At this count, there's 400. A little later, 600 have joined him. Here, let me tell you who they are. All those who were in distress. These are the qualifications of these men. All who were in distress or in debt, and people were looking for them to pay their debts. All those who were discontented gathered around him, and he became their leader. About 400 men were with him at the cave of Adullam. This is obviously a painting of some kind. We don't know if that's what the cave of Adullam looks like, but to house 400, it would have to look something like that, I would think. Can you imagine people coming to you and say, yeah, we'll help you out? And you've got a few renegades, a few rebels, some people who are deep in debt. You've got some perhaps murderers who are fleeing from the law. You've got a few bandits in the group, and all these people, and they want to help you. And David harmonizes them into a militia of sorts, and so on. And he's also responsible for providing food and shelter for them. And some of them perhaps even had their families traveling with them because they were not safe at home. Saul was on the lookout for anybody who associated with David. And so they were all very particular about avoiding him. There's another thing that comes out of this, and I know I'm jumping ahead into 2 Samuel for this picture, but out of this group, we've got a certain segment that really excel in their exploits, their military endeavors, their strength, their prowess, everything that it takes for them to be extraordinary heroes militarily. There are two groups, one group of 30, and out of that a second group of 3. This picture hangs in the Jewish Museum in New York City. It was painted in the late 1800s, 1897, I think, by James Tissot. This is his impression of David's mighty men. I don't think there's 30 there, but nonetheless, that's his impression. You can tell each one, according to him, each one is very stout and very, very militarily alert. And I'm looking for something that, here I think we are. Here's a description of these legendary warriors. Looking at the 3 now, one of the 3, he raised his spear, this is in Scripture, 2 Samuel 23. He raised his spear against 800 men whom he killed in one encounter. I bet he was hungry at lunchtime, don't you think? That's just one. There was another one called Eleazar, who was son of Dodai. The men of Israel retreated when they were confronting the Philistines. The men of Israel retreated, but he stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. There was just a muscular contraction where he could not release the sword after a while, and he he continued to fight in that way. Then there was a man named Shammah. Shammah, he took his stand in the middle of a field of Philistines, and he defended it and struck the Philistines down. And we go on. The three, let's just say those are the three that were very special and were the head of David's bodyguard and other well-documented positions were David's nephews, the sons of his sister, Zeruiah. And they joined David. In fact, many members of David's family joined him because Saul was looking for any way he could inflict pain on David, even if it meant attacking his family members, even his elderly mother and father. So we have David's mighty men, we have the three that I've described. Now, David flees to the wilderness of Judah. Let's see where that is. To the wilderness of Judah, right over here. He goes there and he again hides in caves and so on. You'll find the wilderness of Judah is all of this area, but when you get to certain places, it is called the wilderness of Ziph, and of Maon, and different things happen there because the city is closest to that wilderness, and it takes on that particular name. So here he is, and he escapes to this particular place. This is also where he leaves the men, takes his mother and father, takes them over to Moab, and deposits them there under the care of the king of Moab, and says, please watch over them and protect them. The king says, I will do that, and so on. And then David comes back, and he now arrives at the wilderness of Ziph. This is an interesting place. Saul comes and questions the loyalty of the people, and he hears that David is in this location, and so he's going to make an attack on the location and completely wipe out the city if they don't turn David over to him. And David hears about that, and he leaves so that he can't be there. Then he moves down to the city of Maon, I believe is how you would say that, and so on. An interesting picture comes to us at that location. While David and his men are on one side of the mountain, Saul and his soldiers are on the other side of the mountain. Here they're kind of doing this around the mountain, playing cat and mouse. Neither one knows the other one is there, and they just stay out of each other's way. So David flees to this wilderness of Judah, and then he questions the Benjamites' loyalty. They did not tell Saul about David's covenant, Jonathan's covenant with David, Saul's son. They should have done that because the Benjamites, that was Saul's home tribe. He was of the tribe of Benjamin. And he now questions their loyalty. And he tells them to step forward and to, in other words, own up to their problem. Well, many of them didn't know about the covenant, and they couldn't. This is where Doeg comes forward. Remember the guy looking out of the curtains at the priest's place at the tabernacle? Doeg is a Moabite. He's not a Jew, and he's not a worshiper of God. But he is in charge of all of Saul's flocks. He was the chief herdsman. And he wants to keep his job, and he wants to keep his neck, basically. And so he steps forward and said, oh, I can help you with that. I saw David back at Nob, and he was with the priest there. Saul is really interested in that, and so he gets his forces together, and they move back to the city of Nob, the priestly city. And there Saul kills all 85 priests at Nob, and he destroys the city. Saul, at this point, I see it as kind of a watershed moment where he is now losing real credibility with the people that had been supporting him. You can't trust him. He's way off base. He's irrational. And if he's going to kill the priests, destroy our religious system, there's something wrong with Saul, not with the system. So he kills all of the priests except one, and that's the son of the high priest, Abiathar. He's a priest, and he flees to David, where David is at that time. He's the son of Ahimelech, and he escapes from Nob with the ephod. So what is the ephod? The ephod, if you're unacquainted with it, is a garment that is worn by the high priest during their time of celebration and commemoration of the religious rites. It looks something like this. Well, it looks a lot like this. The whole regalia, from the shoulder epithets to the bottom of the apron, the whole thing is called the ephod. This in particular is the breastplate of the ephod, and this is described and first created in Leviticus and for the priests. Each of those are special gemstones, and each gemstone has a name of one of the tribes inscribed on it. And so when the priest would go into the holy place to sprinkle the blood on the Day of Atonement, each of the tribes of Israel knew that they were being represented as long as the priest was wearing the ephod with him, and that was the only way they knew that they were being represented before God. There was not the personal relationship with God that we enjoy today. They had to depend on the priest doing his work and doing it right, and carrying them into the presence of God, into the Holy of Holies, and so on. And so when this son of the priest that was killed, Abiathar, comes, he brings this regalia with him. This is one of the ways also that people would inquire of the Lord. I won't be able to say it right. The Urim and Thummim. Have you run across that in Scripture? I bet you can't say it 10 times fast, because I can't either. We don't really know what they are, but the best guess, and I'll give you the benefit of the best guess is that they were ways that people encountered of the Lord, and they were probably two stones, again, casting of lots, the words I said. They would cast them, and that would be the way that they would, the Urim and the Thummim, that's it. When the priest came, he brought everything. David is now able to inquire of the Lord. Saul is not able to inquire of the Lord, both because of his personal performance and because there is no priest left at Nob that would inquire for him. So David inquires of the Lord regarding the city of Keilah. Keilah is a community that is under the attack of the Philistines. David is told the Philistines are attacking Keilah, and David inquires of the Lord, should I go with the band that I have? Should I go and fight the Philistines and save Keilah from their attack? And he inquires of the Lord, and his priest with the ephod and so on, they inquire of the Lord, and the Lord, through whatever means is available to them, the Lord says, yes, go. And so he does, and he is victorious. And they stay there for a while. The people are very appreciative, and they feed them, and they help them, and they stay there for I don't know how long. And they stay there for a while. Finally, they hear that Saul's forces are approaching Keilah, because Saul has found out that David is there. David inquires of the Lord again, will the people of Keilah turn me over to Saul? And the Lord said, yes, they will. In spite of you saving them from the Philistines, they will turn you over. And David and his forces left and went to hide in the wilderness of Ziph. Chapter 23. Saul nearly captures David in the Judean wilderness of Maon. That's where I told you they were going on the opposite sides of the mountain and so on. He almost caught up with him. And David and his men, they hide out in the strongholds of En-gedi. It's somewhere in this place where Saul comes, the men are in a cave, and Saul comes, in the language of Scripture, to relieve himself, and he is in the front part of the cave. The men of David are way further back in the cave, and the men are so excited, and they tell David, he's alone, this is your chance, this is what God promised would happen, and now you can take him and kill him, and it will usher you right into the throne room of Israel. David didn't know if he wanted to do that or not, but he did go and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Later he was conscience-stricken because he had done even that, but it played a good part later on. They are down now at the place of En-gedi. This is where he cuts off the robe, and now they move to En-gedi, which is here. And I'm debating. I think I'll at least look at some of this. Let me take you on a little tour of the Holy Land. All right, here's where we are. In case you're wondering what a cross section of Israel would look like, this is pretty much it. So if you come from the Mediterranean Sea and you move inland, that first area is all plains. It's pretty flat territory. You then come to what they call the Shephelah, and then you have some of the foothills, some of the areas where the towns are, where they can feel somewhat secluded, and so on. That's there. And then you come to the upper slopes of the mountains. There's a ridge that runs north to south right through there. You can see perhaps pictured here those ridges that run right through that area. And then the downside of the mountains. Then you come to what they call the escarpment, and it drops significantly down. And what you have there at the surface of the Dead Sea is the lowest surface point of the earth. Some 1,400 feet below sea level is the surface of the Dead Sea. Now, it's not the lowest point of the earth. That's somewhere over east of the Philippines in a trench that I can't recall right now, and that is the lowest point, but it's all underwater. This is above water, and it's the lowest point in the earth. What happens? All of the maps I show you are from the biblical period, or what we assume is the biblical period. All of them show this little extension that was part of the Dead Sea. If you go there today, you'll say it's not on the map, and that would be true. They are mining all of that part, and they've either drained the water or dammed the place, and they are mining all of that because the Dead Sea is just very rich in minerals and so many things that people around the world want. You say, why would they fight for that piece of land? It's rich. It's very rich. I'll show you how rich it is. This is that escarpment that comes down to the Dead Sea. Do you see this over here? That's not white water. It's not white caps. That's mineral deposits. And it gathers there. We talk about the desert area. We think, when we hear desert, we think of the Sahara, which is miles and miles and miles of sand dunes. Now, this is the desert in Israel, wilderness desert area, where not much grows except during the few months of rainy season, and then it materializes. You see all kinds of growth, flowers and different things here, because the ground, even this desert ground, is very rich in nutrition that plants and vegetation needs. And then the sun comes out, and for the next 8 months, it's all dry again, and it turns back into this. David went to En-Gedi. This is En-Gedi. That's the size of one of the real caves there, not an artist's drawing. There is water there. It's cultivated today into a nature preserve, and I'm told, I've not been to this exact spot, but I'm told it's very, very beautiful, very, very attractive. There's another part that they've developed into this nature preserve. Again, same thing. You see the wilderness and the places where David and his men could hide, and there are caves back in behind. You also see this, that they've developed part of the En-Gedi Nature Preserve as a botanical garden. All kinds of special things that are native to the area grow there. This is the Dead Sea. That's at white against the shoreline. This, when you get there, you have this distinct aroma in the air. Not something you'd want to put in a cologne for sure. Do you know what sulfur smells like? Rotten eggs. All of this and what is in solution in the Dead Sea, you'll find sodium chloride, potassium, sulfur, bromine, magnesium, and probably a few things I've left out. You'll find all of that very concentrated here, so that when it dries near the shore, you'll see it looking like that. There are smaller particles that will actually float out in the middle of the Dead Sea, and you'll see these little white specks. I brought one home, but we looked for it last night and I could not find it. But if I do find it, I'll bring it and show it to you. I wouldn't advise you to lick it like I did, but it is definitely sodium chloride. It definitely is. All right. You can't drown in the Dead Sea unless you put your head in the water and breathe the water in. You say he's got to be sitting on the bottom. No, he's floating. There's got to be several feet below him. That's what happens when you're out in the Dead Sea. You cannot sink. You can read the newspaper if you want to, but you can't sink. You can swim. If you have trouble staying on top of the surface in normal water, you would love the Dead Sea. You can definitely stay on top. That's the Dead Sea. All right. I think we'll let him be our last slide today, and we'll continue next week then, and at this point. All right.